Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm Brandon Porch, the current AIA president for this wonderful year. Welcome everybody, especially our speakers, Nancy Powell and Jimmy Orth. I'll start by getting a little AIA business taken care of. So let me share info. Okay, so don't look at this right away. Okay, look at this. Okay, so coming up, we have our Architecture Week. So we'll have a virtual design awards gala coming up on October 16th. The winners of the design awards will be announced this Friday. So stay tuned for that. That same week, we'll have a 777 event, which is emerging architects speaking for 7 minutes about a topic that they are passionate about, and we are still looking for some speakers. So if anybody is interested, let me know. We've also started our adaptive Halloween costume efforts this year. So if anyone's interested in helping, just send me an email. We've met with most of the children already. We have our golf tournament coming up as well in November. And now to just introduce Riverfront Parks Now, it's a kind of a group of nonprofits who have come together to advocate for riverfront parks in downtown. Nancy Powell is the executive director of Scenic Jacksonville. She'll be speaking with us today. I've worked with her a lot through Riverside Avondale preservation. She's dedicated civil servant of Jacksonville and very knowledgeable in all things urban planning and city related. Also speaking will be Jimmy Orth of the River Keepers. I don't know how many years he's been in charge, but it seems like a while. I've worked with him on through the rising tides from time to time. And his wife actually comes and helps weed my garden on occasion. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Nancy, which I'm assuming you will be sharing your screen, since we did not plan on this.
Yeah, I think you need to. Okay, here we go. Let me see here. Share screen. All right, let me pull it up here. Slideshow. Okay, hold on a second. It's pulling up right now.
And if anybody has questions, you can always use the chat function to send some questions, and I'll be monitoring that as we go along.
Okay, well, thanks for having us. Jimmy and I have been taking this presentation on the road with our other other members of our steering committee, and we are really excited to talk with you all because we know that the AIA has been involved with downtown for a long time. And one of the members of our steering committee is Ted Pappas. I think he was trying to join today. Pardon me?
I'm on. I just can't get the visual.
Okay, good. All right. So Ted is on the line also. So you guys, Ted in particular, has been involved with downtown in many iterations, and so we feel like now is the time where vision becomes action. So we are, as Brandon said, a civic group of organizations. We are now 7 nonprofit organizations that have come together. So it's more than any one organization, I think, can really, it's bigger than any of us individually, but Scenic Jacksonville has made this a major initiative. Late Bloomers Club has been at this for a long time on greening of the riverfront. And what happened this year was that the resiliency committee that was formed earlier this year by Councilmember Carlucci was supported by, there's a separate group called Resilient Jacks that of nonprofit organizations that really want to push and support the resiliency efforts. And Jimmy, the Riverkeeper, Shannon Blankenship is the head of that right now. We started having lunchtime conversations after those meetings, talking about downtown and resiliency. Irma was only 3 years ago. It was a huge wake-up call, I think, for downtown. But that's how we started. We started talking about resiliency in downtown. At the same time, of course, Scenic Jacksonville and Late Bloomers, we're concerned about downtown development, downtown and the way it looks and feels, getting people downtown, making it look great. And we've all traveled. I know you guys have traveled to other cities. So what Jimmy and I did is we started doing a deep dive into what other cities have done as it relates to their riverfront. And so this is a presentation that really shows a lot of that. But the starting point for us was looking at the downtown riverfront properties. And this picture you see here is publicly owned properties along the riverfront on the north and the south bank. And you have the Riverwalk, but then the rest of it is undeveloped property, except for number 8, which is currently Mosh. And Mosh is going into a phase of redevelopment also. So you look at this and you say, oh my gosh, this was not by design, but we have such an opportunity in front of us to transform our riverfront. And we feel that an iconic riverfront for all hits multiple benefits. It is the social gathering place. It has health and wellness benefits with COVID and all the needs for people to have outdoor spaces. There's a social equity component. So there's all sorts of social reasons that major parks can have a benefit, but also they stimulate surrounding economic development. And so it's not that we look at it and say, here's a development, give us a little bit of green space. It's here's this great public space and you have an opportunity to be a part of that for economic development. And then the third leg, which is relatively recent, is the resiliency component, is protecting our downtown for the next 50 to 100 years. So our guiding principles, what we started out with was we wanted this to be inclusive and an inviting riverfront for all. Involve the public with a shared vision. Integrate resiliency into the design and use it as a catalyst for economic development. When we started this project, this is a picture of Metropolitan Park as it is today with the Daly's Place and the stadium in the background. And we thought that Lot J was kind of the priority for the stadium district. And so this idea of revitalizing Metropolitan Park and adding Shipyards parks, we thought would really complement a Lot J scenario. Since then, there have been some other developments, which we can talk about later. But the final piece is ensuring that we commit to maintenance and improvements, and that's not been the best in Jacksonville so far, so we have to change the script there. But overall, we envision the connected network of extensive green space and active parks along our riverfront, talking again about public access, reconnecting the community to our river, and creating a sense of place. And so we went into, we're going to show you a series, and I know some of you are really familiar with these, so we'll step through them somewhat quickly, but I'm from Chicago. I can't help but start with Chicago. Grant Park is the front lawn of Chicago, and it was not always like this. There was a railroad that went through here. They were the first green roof because they have parking garages underneath this. There's an art museum there, but in the 80s, it had gone into some sketchy times, and then Chicago recommitted to their riverfront. So Millennial Park, Pritzker Pavilion, Maggie Daley Park, Buckingham Fountain, you can see has been maintained and restored. And the cool thing about Chicago, and what you don't see here, is the whole museum campus back with the planetarium and the aquarium and the field museum. And it keeps going, right? They are adding to this park, down south on the riverfront, but it's connected to 18 miles of lakefront trails and beaches and parks. So there are parks all the way up and down the lakefront. And in the last decade, of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the Chicago Riverwalk. So that started with a transportation grant to expand Wacker Drive underneath, Chicago has this underground transportation system, but they built out the Riverwalk phase by phase. It didn't all start at one time. What you're looking at here is what they call the jetty section. So each block of the Riverwalk has like a different theme. And this one is really meant to have some floating wetland gardens and learn about the ecology of the river. But every block is different. It's very vibrant. There are restaurants, there are kayak launches. And again, it's connected to the lakefront trails and Grant Park. So connections is a key part of what all of these cities are doing. So we'll say, okay, we're not Chicago, right? We're a mid-sized city. Here's Detroit. Detroit is redeveloping the Ralph C. Wilson, they're going to call it the Ralph C. Wilson Centennial Park. It's 22 acres, $50 million. And they have 3 million visitors annually. This one was designed by Van Valkenburg Associates, which is one of the prominent design firms that we see in many of these urban parks. And they're connected, again, to the downtown of Detroit, as well as to a network of greenways, not unlike our Emerald Trail. There is a similar park being built in Buffalo, New York. Also, Ralph C. Wilson is the benefactor of this one, and we'll talk a little bit more about funding a little later. So another mid-sized city, Louisville, 85 acres along the Louisville waterfront. They are adding 22 more. So that's another theme that we're seeing, is that number one, these parks are fairly large to begin with, but they're finding them so successful that they're adding to them in future phases. And in Louisville, you can see another view of the same park. It looks very similar to our shipyards, which is we have the stadium in the background where the Yum Center is. You've got the old Hart Bridge type of freeway here, and that doesn't stop them from connecting it to the downtown area. But they expect they have a $40 million annual economic impact and attracting 2.2 million visitors per year. The other thing about this is that across the river, and we took out the slide on this, but the Cumberland Park is being built. It's 400 acres, and they are looking at this to be a regional impact of these connected parks across the river, even with 2 states. But they're finding that there's such a good demand for that, and here's Memphis. So Memphis has Mud Island, which has been a park, kind of a park with an amphitheater in it. But what Memphis decided is they wanted to revitalize this shoreline park because it connects closer to their downtown. And they are breaking ground on this fall. They expect it to be done in 2022. It's 30 acres. And it's in 4 distinct zones. So there's a civic zone, there's an active zone, there's a community zone, and there's a habitat zone. So at some level, you need enough acreage to be able to meet different types of audience needs, to have family areas, to have, in Memphis's case, they've got Memphis in May. So a big gathering space for Memphis in May was an important consideration. And that's the other thing that we see is the outreach to the community. What does this community want in their downtown park, and designing for that unique location, not just putting a cookie cutter design on everyone's. And what struck us too is how different all of these are. I mean, it's so creative. I mean, look at the Brooklyn Bridge Park. These are a readaptation and adaptive reuse of their shipping piers. One of them has soccer fields. One of them has, I don't even know what's in here, beach areas. And what struck us here about this one is this development on the corner here pays for 90% of the park's maintenance costs. So development and parks go together. It's not an either or. They can coexist in a good way. And this again, is an 85-acre stretch. The linear park along the freeway here is another aspect that we thought is applicable to Jacksonville. Columbus, Ohio, the Scioto Mile was a previously neglected city asset, and they revitalized this park, invested $44 million. It was a public-private partnership that 50-50 was the cost sharing. And they are also connected to a greenway that is over 10 miles long. They have a bicentennial park with a splash pad where there's a lot of gathering, and there's active parts. They have a veterans section of this park. So it's been a very important part of Columbus, Ohio, believe it or not. Columbus and Cincinnati is another example. Look at the stadium district. This looks pretty similar. They have 2 stadiums along their river, and this 32-acre park is it was built for resiliency. I'm going to show you a few more pictures of it. But the bank's development in between the 2 stadiums coexists with this park, as well as even across the river, across the road, there are still additional park areas. And within this park, there is a restaurant and some commercial activity. Here's another view of it. And this is another view of it across the road, but it's connected to the park. So this park, I feel, is very impressive example. And it is designed to flood. So this was an example. They were actually building the park, and they had this huge flood, and they realized that they needed to continue to design this park in order to protect the development on the other side of the river, as well as prepare for sea level rise and future flooding. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jimmy, because he's going to talk a little bit more about the resiliency aspects of these parks.
Yeah, and so as you've seen, parks, we've found, really are able to provide a multitude of benefits to the community in terms of health and wellness and civic engagement, recreation, of course, access to our waterways and economic development. But cities are also turning to parks to help resolve the problems with flooding and to mitigate the impacts of climate change. And in New York City is a perfect example. After Hurricane Sandy devastated New York in 2012, they're now looking to parks and natural areas along the shoreline to help protect the city from future storms. This is a great example, Hunter's Point, which is located on an old industrial site that it now more closely resembles the floodplain that was once here. They went back in and redeveloped this to create wetlands and natural areas that will help to absorb floodwaters and also to serve as a buffer for storm surge. And they're doing this. This is not just the only example. They're doing this throughout New York City. Boston really probably has taken this the farthest in terms of using green infrastructure, natural spaces to help protect the city. They too have realized how vulnerable they are to sea level rise. So they put together a really ambitious plan, the Resilient Boston Harbor Plan, that is looking at natural areas that they currently have, parks, open spaces, and trying to integrate resiliency strategies into those existing parks, and also creating wetlands, enhancing wetlands, and in some cases even retreating from the shoreline. This is just an example of one of the projects downtown, where you also have existing infrastructure and existing development. And so they're also looking at ways, how can we integrate green infrastructure while also making existing structures more resilient. Cumberland Park and the Riverfront Park that's adjacent to it in Nashville are a good example too of something that they're doing. This park in particular is an example of how numerous parks throughout the country are actually looking at installing underground cisterns that can capture stormwater. So I think that's the thing that we came to realize in doing the research on all these parks, is that now cities are really recognizing the co-benefits of parks. It's no longer just looking to them for recreation, which this park obviously provides, but also helping to resolve some of the stormwater and flooding issues that they have. And so there's plenty of examples of this throughout the country where they're starting to integrate stormwater practices into existing parks. And this park, I always like to mention too, that within just 2 blocks of that park and the adjacent park, it's catalyzed $1 billion in private investment. This is a park in Chattanooga, which I always love to talk about Chattanooga, because what they did in Chattanooga is they're kind of the poster child, I guess, for cities recognizing how you can take public spaces, the public realm, and actually utilize that to help revitalize your downtown. And if you've ever been to Chattanooga, I just love how walkable it is. You can go all along both banks of the riverfront. There's a pedestrian bridge that goes across, great parks all along. And I also like to bring up that one of the things I think that stands out to me about Chattanooga is they were actually one of the most polluted cities in the country in the late 60s. Their air quality was the worst air quality in the entire United States. And they realized they had to reimagine Chattanooga. And so they started by really utilizing the river and taking advantage of it. Same thing that we could be doing here in Jacksonville. This is a park where it was a former industrial site. It was a brownfield, and they've gone in, and this is more recent, they've taken this park and converted it into a wetland system that can actually collect stormwater. So it's actually treating the stormwater before it makes it into the river, while also helping to protect from future storms. This storm can withstand a 100-year flood. Another thing that, as Nancy mentioned before with Smale Park, is that they're designing them to flood, and they're actually using them as a way to alleviate flooding concerns. Obviously, you saw the cisterns, but this is a way that they have actually gone and re-engineered what was once essentially a ditch, turned it into, provided more capacity to hold stormwater, but also designed to flood. And so this park, which extends, I believe this park extends for like over 100, it's a 160 acre linear park. They designed this specifically to flood and help alleviate flooding from surrounding development. And so you can see here, all of the infrastructure in the park is designed to flood. It's and to withstand flooding, so that you can, instead of going back and having to rebuild the park, you simply clean it up. And then as those flood waters reside, it's ready to go again for recreational purposes. So I always love seeing the before and after on that.
Okay, so bringing it back to Florida, I'm sure you guys have all been to Tampa and St. Pete, so I'm just going to show a couple of examples from there. This is the Curtis Hickson Waterfront Park, and it's very similar to our landing property. It's about 8 acres. It's along the 2.4 mile Tampa Riverwalk, and lots of activity there, lots of events. Over 1 million people attend this park on special events. And one of the things that Tampa did, I'm sure you're familiar with it, is that they extended their Riverwalk much farther than we did. For example, we didn't go down to Metropolitan Park with our Riverwalk, but they went down to an old industrial area, which is now a very vibrant area called Armature Works on one end. And then on the other end is Waterworks and Spark Wharf. So it's really, and it's got a lot more amenities, I guess. And so Tampa's a great example, but across the river from that park is a newly revitalized park. It's called the Julian Lane Riverfront Park. And this is a very active park. It's 25 acres. It reopened in 2018. And during their community visioning process, they asked that community on that side of the river, what did they want in a park? And this community wanted more active space. There are tennis courts, there are fields, soccer fields. And in this case, there's a performance boathouse you can see here where, crew and paddleboarding and kayaking, you can learn in this little cove here. This is a floating dock, so you can learn without the currents of the river, as well as this performance boathouse has a sloping roof, so it goes down into a rain garden. Also a big event lawn, so they have events post-COVID. I'm sure they'll have more of them. So this has won a lot of awards. Here's another view of it more at nighttime. You've got some public art here on the left-hand side, which provides some shade, as well as you can see this, the attractiveness of this boathouse. My daughter lives there, and she tells me it's a very popular place for weddings. And so there's event revenue that comes from renting out this space on the riverfront. And going to St. Petersburg, the St. Pete Pier reopened in July of this year. It's really phenomenal. I was able to visit in July when we were visiting my daughters. So this is not really just a pier, it's a pier park. It's 26 acres. It has a beach. It has 7 restaurants. It has a discovery center that you can learn about the river. It has a fishing area. It was a $92 million investment, but they expect an $80 million annual economic impact. So one of the things that impressed us about St. Pete is that they have a master plan. This pier district, they call it a district, is one of 7 waterfront districts in St. Pete. And their 2015 master plan covers each of those waterfront districts. And so it's a really great model. And most of this was publicly funded, although the public art was not. Here's a part of the park where it has wetlands and native landscaping, as well as the Janet Eichelman, I think that's Bending Arc. At night, this is really, you have to be there in person to really appreciate it. I think at nighttime, it's very stunning as well. And I got this picture from Michael Dunlap. So Michael, I'm using it that you sent. But connectivity, coming back to Jacksonville then, the Emerald Trail is in full speed ahead. We are so appreciative that that is going and really excited about how that can transform Jacksonville. And so what we envision is once people get on this trail and we're able to come downtown, of course, there should be something really lively and public that they can enjoy. And when you're just coming to the park, or when you are coming to the park, you can rent a bike and hop on the trail and go visit other parts of Jacksonville. So, connecting both sides of the river, the Fuller Warren Bridge is going to have the multi-use path. There's the water taxi that can go across the way on other parts of the river, or I know there's other opportunities as well. So this amplifies the many downtown initiatives. And I was able to find this from Arbus Magazine. We got to talk with some folks at Haskell yesterday, and we were talking about, the several of the plans that have been in place and the key initiative that the AIA has participated in, which is that whole idea of connectivity and activity along the Riverwalk. So, we think this is very complementary to that work. And we know that we're plugged into the Downtown Investment Authority. We're trying to follow them very closely. We know that Lori Boyer is working on plans for Friendship Fountain, as well as the Performing Arts Center, the park in front of the Performing Arts Center. So we'd love to talk a little bit more about that. All of these parks have in common a community visioning process. I know you guys have had them. We've all participated in them. Sometimes they can be frustrating, but really to get public buy-in, it's really necessary to find out, in our case, what is uniquely Jacksonville? What is the topography? We don't know right now, what exactly lands we're talking about, but when we get to that point, there's a unique topography of our river, as well as the land that is associated with it, and also the heritage and needs and interests of downtown Jacksonville. So, so that is really something that we are promoting, which is this needs to be a public process and with public input. Just quickly on the economics of this, we've got some documents on our website. We're working a little bit more on this. We know this is a critical question, but when you look at it from an economic impact perspective, what other cities have found is a 1 to 8 to 1 to 40 return on investment. In the St. Pete, for example, the master plan, they assumed a 1 to 8 return. Rising property values, bed taxes, spending, attracting more residents. We know that that is a critical focus for the Downtown Investment Authority, and then the jobs that are associated with it. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg in some sense, right? We need people to attract retail and restaurant, to attract investment. But in order to attract people, you need things for people to do. And a downtown park is a critical component of that. And again, just back to when we say downtown park, we're not talking about necessarily just one park, although we do feel that a signature major downtown park is really important, but we're talking about a network of parks. And that's one of the things that we have found from other cities is that they're adding to their parks. They're not, they don't look at it as a one-time deal. Funding sources, public-private partnerships are very common. A lot of times there's a conservancy or an organization that helps raise money, that helps for both construction and maintenance. There are grants available, and in this case, there's brownfield grants, there's river grants, there's health and wellness types of things. We haven't gone to explore those yet because we're just not, we're not at that point. But there are also tax increments districts. The Houston example, that is funded, the Bayou is funded by a tax increment district there. Some cities have dedicated park taxes. There's also operations that can be done. And then on the private side, again, there's several sources. So the point is, it's not any one source that has the full, that bears the full load. But in closing, the network of parks and green spaces and trails really is an opportunity for us to connect our city, to connect to downtown, to connect across the river. And where we are right now is we're in the, the broad community support is what we're looking for. We've been out taking this on the road. We are talking to city leaders and different groups. If you guys have ideas of people that we can talk to in your neighborhoods or any kind of civic organizations, we are happy to, to do more of these. We feel that the prioritization of public space on public land is really the shift that we're looking for. We've really focused a lot, even though Jacksonville has had a lot of plans, we know that we really don't have a plan right now. We've had lots of documents and nobody wants to do a plan that sits on the shelf. But we feel that now is the time to really move from vision, to action. And an open dialogue with the community is really what is important, which is why we're here today. So, so that's where we are. Jimmy, did I miss anything?
No, I think that was a good summation of this. I think we were even surprised when we started digging into looking at all these other parks, and it really does seem like there is a formula for success. And I actually argue that it's a much less risky and more conservative investment approach to revitalizing downtown is to invest in parks. And I think and partly because of the co-benefits that they provide, as you saw today. That's something that so many communities are looking to. They're looking at parks as opportunities to address many social and environmental needs in the community. And then of course the economics. I think that was surprising to me is how time and time again, these parks really do provide an incredible return on investment. And I've also, talked about, I compare it to the Landing. The Landing was there for 33 years. We spent about 20, I think it was about 20 million was the city's investment. That was in 1987 dollars to build the Landing. And then we, of course, spent about 25 million to get out of the deal and tear it down. But I mean, you look at over that 33 years, what a park could do. A park will last if it's built, if an iconic park is built and it's properly maintained and updated, it will last for potentially generations. And I look at Memorial Park as an example that park has been providing benefits to the community for multiple generations. And I think that's what parks can do. And also, final point is I think we really need to look at parks as essential infrastructure. It was for a long time that we looked at them just as sources of recreation, but I think now we really realize they're essential infrastructure to protect us from storms, to help with health and wellness issues, and also as economic drivers in our community. So that's the takeaway message from me is that there's so many benefits to these that we have to look at it holistically. And then I think what Nancy said is looking at these other cities that have done it so successfully, there is a formula for success. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's been proven time and time again. And that seems to be the trend in so many cities now to looking to the riverfront and providing and looking to the public realm as the way to revitalize their downtown.
Okay. Well, thanks. One thing I find inspiring is that you guys just kind of created this movement. You saw a need and you were like, well, we're not just going to wait and complain about what's not happening. We're going to take action and do it. And I think that's very inspirational to all of us. So how can we help you? And specifically about upcoming, maybe tomorrow.
Can I say something real quick about that before we answer the question, Brandon?
Yeah.
Honestly, this is not anything new. You know, that's the thing that we found is we've kind of repackaged it in a way. I think maybe our vision's a little broader than what some people have proposed in the past, but we even looked at the DIA, the CRA. The CRA has so many of these elements in it right now. And so, you know, if you look at even our own CRA that we currently have, it provides a roadmap for this type of vision. And of course, there's been a lot of other people that have had similar visions in the past, even going back to John Delaney's administration. He had proposed something similar. And so this isn't anything new. I think it's just hasn't been, we haven't taken the steps to realize the vision. And that's what we think the timing is right, we feel like. Nancy, I'll let you answer the question about how folks can help.
Yeah, so as we had mentioned, you probably read in the paper also, there was a couple of articles about, we were invited to speak at last week's Downtown Investment Authority, their Strategic Implementation Committee